Hi, Wolang Clan. Fancy seeing you here. We're here to talk today about back to school planning. And the real question is, back to what exactly? It's a mess out there. It really is. So, what I'm jumping on here today to tell you is that you can't control that, right? We have no control over what we cannot control. So there are some things that we can do to minimize the amount of stress that we let into our back to school planning. Now, you've got some options here. You can take a back seat to all of it for now, which is absolutely okay. You can definitely bookmark this, save it for later, and watch it when you need it. You can also, if you're like me, I'm the type of person who I like to take my sweet time planning. I'm totally one of those teachers who likes to take 2 to 3 weeks before the start of school to get all my ish together. That makes me feel good before the start of back to school, because like accountants in April, back to school season is our crazy season. So I like to get all of my little duckies in a row. I have 5 absolute must-dos, no exceptions, for back to school, no matter what back to school looks like for you. And I think that, and they're in order, and I think that if you follow this order of my 5 must-dos that I've learned from years of experience in the classroom, doing it really wrong, and then eventually figuring it out, that this is going to save you a lot of stress in what is, I am guaranteeing you, going to be the most stressful back to school season that we've seen yet. You're already feeling it, and it's mid-July. So I'm coming on here today to be helpful and make your life a lot less crazy. There are some things that you can control, and this is what you can control, okay? The first one, my number one thing, my absolute must do, is deep curriculum planning. No exceptions. Deep curriculum planning. Ernie feels very strongly about it too. You might hear her barking. I wouldn't be surprised that happened. It's really important that you take some time to take a real critical eye to your curriculum. Now, yesterday I did a live, you can find that below, about 3 questions that you need to ask yourself about your curriculum. And that video is all about, like, are your students getting what they need from your curriculum? About how to infuse equity into absolutely everything that you do. And equity, of course, guides everything. It makes sure that your curriculum is assessing the right things, that you're talking about the right things, and that you have really got your lessons on lock so that everybody's learning the way that they need to be served. And when you look at your curriculum, the rest of your year just flows so much smoother. That's the first thing that you need to look at. And the reason why you need to look at that first before anything that you do for back to school planning is because A, it's the most important, and B, it takes the most time. Now, you can really do all of your back to school planning depending on what your back to school allotted professional development time is at school. You know, that varies depending on where you're at. I used to get a week. Depending on what district, it was, like 4 to 6 days officially. I always use a little bit more than that. But it doesn't need to necessarily take that much time. I told you earlier, I like to take 2 weeks, personally, because I like to go my little slow and steady pace. But for curriculum, I would say it's a solid day, like a solid 8 hours. Spread it out if you can. And that doesn't mean that you're like doing the full deep dive of absolutely everything in your curriculum. You ain't got time for that. No. What's really going to happen is you are going to look at a nice general overview from a bird's eye perspective before you actually start getting into it and seeing where your problems are so that you can get into it and start fixing it before you actually start working on things. Because once you get into the school year, things get pushed aside that shouldn't, because you don't have time to deal with it, right? Those big problems you don't have time to fuss with, do it now. It's the most important thing, and it's going to take the most time. Do it now. It's also going to direct a lot of the decisions that you're going to make in 2, 3, 4, and 5, right? Step number 2, an unpopular one, but the most important, okay? I'm going to ruffle some feathers with this, but you need to do this. Step number 2 is minimal. The absolute bare bones, skeletal remains type classroom setup. Laughable in the virtual world, right? But like my classroom setup was this. March, April, May, June. So you might not have to do that this year, which is, oh my God, so many tears, buckets of tears. But what I'm actually going to be doing is I'm not going back into the classroom this year, but what I'm going to be showing teachers is how to use posters that you can take up off. What's the word I'm looking for? Why am I forgetting this right now? You can remove with poster paper, so you can set up yourself a nice little classroom wall per se, and that's going to be my skeletal bare bones classroom setup for the foreseeable future. And if you are in the situation where you're going back to the classroom, that's not the situation in my state, but it might be for yours, get just what you need, because you have no idea what's going to happen when you get into your classroom, right? There's going to be a ton of regulations, I'm sure, on like what you can clean, what you can't clean. So don't spend a lot of time decorating or doing things, putting things on your walls. I advocate for not doing a lot of that in the before your students get there anyways. Like, I really think that we as classroom teachers spend a little too much time on decor, and it's way more for us than it is for them. Like, for real, it is. Like, half the reason I like decorating my classroom is for me, because I'm in there, not really for my students. So that shouldn't be something that happens during like the crazy busy season of back to school. I honestly do a lot of my decorating 3 weeks into the school year. I don't do it right before all my kids get there, because that is freaking precious time. I don't have that kind of time. So what does that mean, like absolute bare bones classroom setup? If you're doing a virtual setup, that means that you have an office space, a little dedicated area in your house with your things that you need to do virtual teaching. And some of those things are a tripod. Those are really cheap. I got mine that's $13 on Amazon. Just Google tripod in Amazon, and I can drop a link for you below here too of the one that I got, that holds up your phone right here. And you can also, and I would also recommend like some sort of lighting if you're doing virtual teaching. Like, I've got a little light right here that makes things a lot easier when you're doing videos, so that you can make videos any time of day and not worry about what's going on. Really easy investment. Done. You can make videos any time of day. It's going to make your teaching life a lot easier. Minimum classroom setup if you're doing virtual. And if you are going back into the classroom, what that means is putting your desk where it needs to be, putting back up the minimal amount of posters, maybe getting a few things on TPT for what you really like, but that's it. Like, don't spend a lot of time rearranging your desks, because we don't know what we're going back to. So it's not worth spending the time on it right now. And the rest of it, because you know there's going to be more classroom setup, right? You will be able to do that better when you know your kids. Like 2 weeks into the school year, I always rearrange my room. I always go back in and move my desks and put students in different spots once I figure out like how they mesh with each other. And I also move my supplies just a little bit so that I know kind of what the flow of class is like what my class sizes are and everything, because after 2 weeks everything's kind of settled a little bit, right? We know a little more about what's going on. So that's why I say, and I really advocate for you to only halfway set up your room. Like, get it functional and make sure that it looks nice, but it's not done. It is not a finished product. And honestly, like, no classroom is a finished product. I put stuff up and take things down all the way up to like through the year. Honestly, like up until March, I was doing things with putting things up and taking things down. Your classroom, this is a myth of teaching, does not have to be done and beautiful come the first day of school. That is not true. Your students will not even remember what it looks like. They're only going to remember you. Which is why I think that number 3 is so important. Step number 3 is your rock solid day 1 and day 2 plans. Yeah, I said 2 days. You need to have every single minute of day 1 and day 2 mapped out to the T. The reason why is for the obvious reasons. You want to be an organized teacher and you want to have your lesson plans really well mapped out, but especially on day 1 and day 2 because you have no idea what type of interruptions you're going to get. You know they're going to be interruptions, but you don't know what they're going to be like. Fire drills, you know those always happen the first week. You're going to have all kinds of students coming in and out, showing you their schedules. I'm in this class, I'm not in this class, blah, 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 blah. Admin's knocking on your door every 5 seconds if you're at a school like mine. Like, there's going to be tons of interruptions all day long. So you want to have on the board ready to go a really top-notch agenda that has everything mapped out for students so they can honestly follow along without you. And I have a completely mapped out day 1 plan for both French and Spanish level 1 that you can find on my blog. I can link those below in the video here. A really important part of that too is that you want your students to feel really secure the first day. They need to know that you got this on lock because they've got a lot of things that they're worried about, especially this year, and they don't want to be worried for you about what's going on. And your lesson plans are the absolute core of what you do as a teacher. Like, they're not looking at what's on the walls. They're not looking at things like exactly how organized your room is. Like, yeah, that's important, but you know what's the most important? What you do on the first day. So please, for the love of God, do not do the syllabus. That's the worst idea ever. It's literally the worst. Do not do the syllabus the first day. There are way better things that you could do than the syllabus on the first day. There's so many ideas. Check out that blog post for a gazillion different things that you could do besides the syllabus. Please don't do the syllabus. If you learn nothing else, don't do the syllabus the first day. Number 4 of your essentials, like absolutely must do for back to school planning, is make sure that you have all your student info on lock. That means that you have the absolute most up-to-date rosters. As in, like 10 minutes before the first bell rings, you're checking Power School or whatever your like Power, I don't know, I've only ever used Power School, but whatever your student organization for information might be, that you know exactly who's on your roster to the best of your ability, and that you have a way to organize all of that information into some sort of attendance log. So for me, what I used to do is I would give each student a manila folder on the first day of school with their name on it, and it was placed on their seat. So they knew exactly where to go, and I already was getting to know their names because I'd written them out a bunch of times before the first day of school. That's going to look really different this year, right? Your organization system for names might be different, but have something when it comes to organization of student information and names. If you're in middle school, you might have something like for 6th graders, I know we used to still have cubbies for some 6th graders. So whatever your student info looks like, that's really, really important. Students want to know that their logistics are taken care of. So things like allergy information from the nurse too, IEPs and BIPs especially, like you want to make sure that you have all of those organized, ready to go, up to date. So that when, not if, when you get those few surprises that come on day 1, 2, or 3 of changes, they're not going to throw you for a loop. Like, you've got those. You've got a plan for those. And then number 5 is having all of your school information down. Yeah, I said it. I really think that those 4 are more important than your basic school information. You can honestly pick up the flow of school better during the actual school day. Yeah, it's a little bit more stressful, but you know what's the most stressful experience? Ask me how I know. Not having your students' information together, not knowing who's supposed to come into your class, or not having a good first day plan, or maybe not having enough desks for your students because you didn't have an exact number on your roster with 3 or 4 extras to spare. That's a terrible experience for both you and your students. Now, virtually, this is going to be a crazy different experience for us, right? But you can get all of the school information during the school day as you move through it. It's not ideal, but you can do it. So what do I mean by school information? I mean the things that everybody else tells you that you need to do first. So let's say that you're moving to a new school this year. My heart goes out to you. You are a hero if you're going to a new school this year. Let's say you need to figure out what the transition period is between lunches, or exactly what your schedule is going to look like and what time that is. Students don't even know what the schedule looks like, so it's not that big of a deal if you are not well versed in it. And it's probably going to change anyways. So if you mess it up on the first day, it's not that big of a deal because you'll get the hang of it. Everybody gets the hang of that. It is important. Trust me, it's important. But I really think that curriculum, lesson planning, basic setup, and student info are more important than understanding the logistics of how your school works, because you'll figure that out for sure. That's going to happen, no problem. If you do have time for it, though, if you get to that point where you're like, okay, Devin, I know that I've got my student information on lock. I've got a nice binder with all my attendance together. I know exactly what I'm doing day 1 and day 2 because I've got your blog posts and I know exactly what's going to happen. I know what game I'm going to play with my Spanish 1s. It's going to be really fun. I know exactly where my students are going to be sitting, or I already have the Zoom room set up for their first day. Cool. You set. That's awesome. Then you can start really looking into, all right, once I get into my room, where's the copier? All right, once I get into my room, what exactly is going to be the procedure for COVID sanitation processes? Okay, once I get into my room, or if we're not going to be in our room for 30 days, what's going to be the procedure for contacting parents if we think that there's an issue with students wearing their masks or not wearing their masks? So even though I know that that's what everybody has on their minds right now, the reason I think that you can wait for all of those things is because you can't control them. You can't. And most likely, those policies are going to change as soon as students arrive at school, whatever arriving looks like. It's going to change on a day-to-day basis. I honestly think that. As soon as schools get in, it's going to change day to day. And the reason I'm basing my prediction, I guess you could say, on that is that my son is in daycare right now. He's 4 years old, and the daycare has already shut down twice because the teachers have gotten sick or they've had to get tested. And so each time that there's been some sort of issue with a COVID, I guess you would call it scare, they have to change the procedures. And the only reason I bring that up is because I think that's what's going to happen with schools too. As we get students back into the routine of the new back to school, everything's going to change on a week-by-week basis as we see what happens when everybody gets back into the building or when everybody gets back into the virtual space of school. It's going to change every day or week by week, so there's no use fussing about it now because we can't control it. We can't. What we can control is having a freaking rock-solid curriculum. Because with a curriculum, you can adjust it to a distance module or an in-person module. If you have rock-solid curriculum, you know that you're going to be serving your students well, no matter whether it's in person or delivered virtually. You can control your setup. You can make sure that you're organized and ready to go for no matter what your district asks you to do, whether it's fair or not. You can be set up for it. The third thing that you can make sure that you can at least be in control of, because everything else is probably going to change, is you can have a rock solid first and second day plan. And if you're not sure of whether that's going to be virtual or in person, then don't worry about that step right now. You can't control it, so don't worry about it. Maybe you can play around with some ideas right now, but you can't control it. Worrying about it isn't going to fix it. Number 4, you can control the student info. You can control that. You absolutely can. You can control knowing who's in your class and making sure that they feel welcome no matter what setting you're in. And you can control how much you focus on the school basics, the logistics, and the information that rolls in. I feel for you. We're going through a hard time right now as an education community, and I hope that something from this helps you. And if there's anything else that I can do to serve you, please let me know in the comments, or you can reach out to me in a DM on Instagram or on Facebook. I am here to serve you. We are going to get through this together. And back to school deserves to have a teeny tiny little still bit of joy in it. And if that means that you wait a little bit to worry about it, then wait. And if that means if you're like me and you're already starting to think about it, like every second, like me, even though I'm not going back into the classroom, then hey, I'm here for it. Send me a message. We'll talk all day long about back to school plans. But I'm here to serve you, and I hope that you have a great rest of your day, Wolan Clan. And if you want to find out more about good ideas for planning and how to stay organized no matter what back to school season throws at you, I'm going to leave another link in the description, but you can also go to www.lalibrelanguagelearning.com//toolkit for a big giant guide of all things planning, organization, proficiency, and curriculum creation for this upcoming back to school season to really get you set up nicely. Again, it's lalibrelanguagelearning.com/proficiency, and I'll leave a link in the description below so that you can get your hands on that too. It's a completely free guide that'll help you with all your back to school woes. And I'll hopefully turn it into a little bit of joy. Okay? Bye. Y'all have a great rest of your day.